Tesla shareholders, get ready. Hans watched a clip from an interview between Amit and Tom Lee, which he said blew his mind. He then sent me that clip and it blew my mind. I'm now going to share that clip with you guys and it's going to blow your mind too.
So a lot of the institutional guys will say, well, Tesla's at $1 trillion, PE of 200. That person that can tell you all the ins and outs of FSD doesn't understand valuation. But your argument here is, well, that person probably owns a Tesla. They have experience with FSD. They can be a little bit creative in terms of their imagination on where the company can go. And valuation might not matter as much. Is that the argument from the valuation side that says a 200 PE is crazy versus the cult member who says, I am in this car every day. You don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, let me put it this way. It's a very cogent question you're asking. But the real second question to that is, how many people fundamentally need the PE to be the basis for an investment? It's a shrinking universe, okay? Let me put it this way. Do you own a luxury watch?
I don't.
Okay. So let's say someone has or do you have any art or something, like a collectible?
Probably not, no.
Okay. Because remember, Tesla is scarce.
I have a Tesla, though.
Yeah. But see, okay, I mean, Tesla is scarce as art. Because name another company like Tesla. There's electric car companies and robots, but in the world today, go around the world, ask 8 billion people, is there another company like Tesla? We'll say, nope, there's only one Tesla.
Just one Tesla.
Okay, so that's a Da Vinci.
Wow.
Right? Think about that. It's like there's just one Tesla. And so then you say, pretend this is a Da Vinci, and someone will say, I'm only going to value this based on the value of the wood and the string and the paper. And so the PE of this is actually 12 cents. But then 100 people say, no, there's only one painting like this.
Right.
And I'm going to pay $100 million. That's the Tesla thing. Some people will say, oh, Tesla's a car company, but that's a small cohort. Everyone else says Tesla is a Da Vinci, right? There's no other company like Tesla in the world. So shouldn't that scarcity be worth a premium?
I have never thought of it like that, quite frankly. I mean, that is the first time I've even heard that as a comparison, but it makes a lot of sense because we know Elon's brand is superseding a lot of the brands. I mean, I don't even know who the CEO of Procter & Gamble is.
Correct. I mean, yeah, who's the CEO of the biggest company that's not a tech?
Right.
We can't even name them. And another thing you could say is that proves Tesla has a fixed supply.
Correct.
Of one. And when it's gone, there's no other Tesla. But they have superior manufacturing. Making a car is one of the hardest things in the world to do, and making electric, and they do it profitably.
Right.
And then look at Elon says, let's do something in space, and then he's 90% of the space business. And then he says, let's do some AI, and then Grok is valued at 130 billion. I mean, kind of he knows how to create businesses, and but there's only one Tesla in the world. Tesla company.
Right.
People might say it's a commodity, but I mean...
It's an argument that's hard to justify from that perspective outside of just using valuation.
So Hans, why did that clip blow your mind?
Well, it is, Tom here, his point, it's so on the money and also creative. I've never heard anyone use that specific framing to talk about valuations. And it really is, I think it captures a lot of what it is that I think retail investors see in so many different companies, whether it's Tesla or whether it's Palantir or potentially Lemonade or Robinhood, Coinbase, these companies where you have these founders who are just incredible executors. And especially, we live in this age now that is quite different from the market of the past. Even when Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin were incredible founders. And yet they founded Google at a point in time when venture capital firms demanded that as that company grew, those founders get kneecapped and have some professional dork knob installed as CEO who didn't understand the business fundamentally and didn't understand the vision, didn't understand what it could be. And starting, in the post-PayPal mafia era, or really the era of PayPal mafia, and since then, we've had so many more of these companies where that model has been flipped on its head. And founders, if they can grow into the role of being a CEO, get to hold on to control of their company, and they get to shepherd that vision much further and much longer than they were able to in the past. And this has created a dynamic in the marketplace where these companies can continue to grow in the public markets the same types of magnitude that they grew in the private markets. And this is what you see with companies like, I would say Jeff Bezos is one of the forerunners of this type of founder CEO who is able to actually retain control of his company all the way from the day the company is started as a private company all the way to being one of the largest companies in the world by market cap in the public markets. And so when you take that and then you say, how many painters do you know the names of in the world? There's probably not that many. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Picasso, like there's a handful. And I think the same way that there's a handful of these titans of the art world, there's also a handful of these titans of the business world. And Elon is certainly amongst that group. I think undoubtedly is the preeminent figure in that group, that no one has created more companies that have created more value than Elon. Jensen obviously is an incredible CEO who's been executing for a long time on this vision. NVIDIA and Apple kind of seem to trade back and forth as who is the biggest market cap company. But when you then say, let's factor in Tesla and SpaceX, like starting a car company and surviving is basically impossible. Starting an electric car company and surviving is really, really impossible, especially when you don't have the backing of the Chinese government like BYD does. Then to do that while you start an impossible space company. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to purchase X, fire 80% of the, Twitter, fire 80% of the staff, rename it X, and it's going to survive and continue to be the town square of the world's public conversation. Oh, and we're going to start XAI and like there's no one else in the history of entrepreneurship who has done the number of different things that Elon has done to the scale that he has done them. And that is, you could talk about it in the artistic way, like it is his brand. Like he can just do things that other people can't do. He can make the impossible into reality, even if it's late. And that is something that investors are willing to pay a premium to actually be invested in a founder of that quality, who just finds a way to, make goo gobs of money. And on the flip side, you can also look at it really just through the rational lens of, you can call it brand, or you can just call it historically justified probability weighting, that Elon is much more likely to make robotaxis work, which are a huge transformative business model, than other founders because he has a history of making these types of impossible things into reality. So I think it is completely rational on the one hand, and on the other hand, just like Tom Lee was saying, the scarce supply of the ability, there's not other public market Tesla or Elon companies that retail investors can invest in. So if you want exposure to Elon, you don't get to invest in SpaceX. You don't get to invest in XAI. You don't get to invest in these other things. And as a result, that does, I think, expand the demand for those people who want to be invested in Elon Musk and what he's doing. They have to go to Tesla. There is that fixed supply, one company, one market cap, one amount of shares with very minimal dilution over time at this point. So that all of that desire to be invested in his missions and his companies gets funneled there. And so that does create, that scarcity creates a premium on what people are willing to pay.
There's a lot to unpack there, but I'm really glad you mentioned Amazon. Before the video, I was thinking, what is a company out there which really is akin to Tesla? And to kind of answer that question, I think you've got to think of the scale that this company has met, the innovation, its ecosystem, its product roadmap, all of those kind of things. I think Apple in its heyday maybe hit some of these strides. Amazon definitely as well. These are some big dogs, right? So Tesla's up there with the big dogs, but all of these companies are now reasonably mature. Tesla's arguably the only one. Nvidia, maybe some would argue as well, but definitely Tesla is one which has hit this scale, but still has such a huge amount of potential. Meaning, maybe it is the only company out there like that. So therefore, is Tesla truly a one-of-one scarce asset on those principles alone?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. Like, we don't have a clear vision from Amazon on how they're going to 10x the company over the next 10 years. We certainly don't have that from Apple. There is a possibility with NVIDIA that, intelligence just being what intelligence is, that is a real possibility. And Jensen, obviously, as a founder CEO who is a absolute beast, he has a good shot at making that happen. And I think that's why there are a lot of people who are put off by Elon for other reasons, who, if they want that type of an asset, they do flock to NVIDIA. And that is why NVIDIA also demands the type of premium that it demands. But yeah, I really do like the comparison of Amazon. And it's one that I've made for a long time. I have said that books are to Amazon what cars are to Tesla. That, figuring out the complexities of building out this online marketplace for something as, you could think of it as simple as books, but then also as complicated as books. Like, how many titles are there? And you have to have a page for every single one of those titles, and you have to have the structure for people to find them, and all of the complexities of building out that digital online bookstore. But as Jeff was building that, he always knew in his mind that books are just the beginning, they're not the end. And so people thought, oh my gosh, Barnes and Noble's gonna crush Amazon because they're Barnes and Noble. Of course they can. They know books better than anybody. And what's harder, building an in-person book network all across the country with these huge locations and massive inventory and blah, 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 or building a simple website? And Jeff was like, no, we want to figure out how to do e-commerce with everything for everyone in the United States. And people just laughed. He used books as that stepping stone to build the bigger vision and the bigger idea. And cars have been that for Elon Musk since the beginning as well. That cars were part of the grand strategy to transition the world to a sustainable energy economy. And it just so happens that solving real-world driving intelligence and electric vehicles at the same time is a big part of doing that. And we are now building in Tesla the Chat GPT of the physical world. It's what I call meat space GPT. And actually being able to use this artificial intelligence technology that has been developed to do really useful things around the world that you want to do every day, that you would prefer to outsource to something else that is essentially free. And that's what Tesla is now building. And the upside potential on what that can do is incredible. And that's, it starts with the robotaxi network, but it doesn't end there. There's, the whole Optimus humanoid robot project that is on the backside of even that. And yeah, like, we just have no idea what the total upside is on all of that. Even though Tesla's one of the largest companies in the world today, the company that owns even 10% of labor in the world is, a company that's dramatically larger than anything that exists today. So it's very interesting. And, I think that really mirrors, to come back to the Amazon analogy, the phase where Amazon, as, trying to be able to deliver books and e-commerce to the world through the ups and downs of the yearly market cycle, and to be able to handle traffic at Christmas time as well as on July 7th, that posed some very real technical challenges to their compute infrastructure, their server infrastructure. And so they built Amazon Web Services, and then Amazon Web Services ended up becoming the key value driver for Amazon, the company. And that's FSD and robotaxis are to Tesla what AWS was to Amazon. The robotaxi in particular is a new primitive for transport that has never existed before. That Waymo is a great service, and an incredible product. They have figured out how to offer a fully autonomous driving vehicle to customers who can pay for them and get rides. But they have done that at essentially the same, if not even higher price that you would pay to receive that service from a human driver. And while there are benefits to having it be driverless that are nice for a lot of people, when you're offering that at the same price point as Uber, then you don't have the ability to just take over 100% market share. There's always going to be people that want to use Uber, they want to use Lyft, they want to drive their own cars instead, all these other things. But once you can offer that same service, and now you can bring the price down by 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, then there's no way that Uber and Lyft can compete. In fact, there's almost no way that, most people's personal transport vehicle even competes against that. And that is a new primitive to transportation. And that is the future that we are moving towards rapidly with robotaxi, that it will completely change the way that humans get from point A to point B. And it will also completely change the way that goods get from point A to point B on the ground here in the United States first. And then, that'll begin to roll out further and further across the world as well. And that is the type of new primitive that Amazon offered to the world with AWS, that, they had these pieces of infrastructure that people could buy, kind of mix and match as they needed, whether it was storage, whether it was compute, whether it was servers and internet bandwidth and all these different things to be able to handle traffic. Like, they offered these things as easy to access, easy to compose building blocks for people to then build all kinds of apps on top of. And so, yeah, there's going to be business models that get built on top of the Tesla robotaxi service that look in the real world similar to what the software 2.0 or web 2.0 like app revolution of the 2010s looked in the digital realm. And it's just incredible to watch this story kind of unfold in real time and get to see some of the types of innovations that we saw, on our phones over the last 15 years, then be translated into the real world again.
Some might argue that for Tesla to be considered a truly scarce asset, it probably needs to be winner takes most in the markets and product roadmaps which is operating in. So if we think about EVs, energy, robotics, AI, do you think Tesla will be a winner takes most in those markets once that starts to roll out?
I would disagree with the premise. I don't think that it's necessary that it has to be winner take most in all of those areas. People who think that are thinking about those industries as being roughly the same size, distant into the future that they are today. And they're essentially factoring out growth, and they don't understand a concept that's called the elasticity of demand, or the price elasticity of demand, that as you bring the price of transportation down by half, you increase the demand for transportation by maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, actually. So when you realize that the TAMs for all of these markets are probably at least an order of magnitude more than these types of people predict, then all of a sudden it relieves the pressure that it has to be a winner take most in order to justify valuations. Just like if you go back to use the Amazon analogy again, people never expected, like, who is predicting in the year 2001 or 2002 or even 2005 or 2010, I guess it was probably somewhere around 2000 no, I think it was later than that AWS started to print real profits for Amazon's bottom line. I think it was in the early 2010s somewhere. But yeah, people before that weren't expecting those those markets didn't exist yet. No one was planning that they would exist. No one was creating valuations based on what AWS was going to be for the business. And while you don't know exactly what those business models are going to be ahead of time, if you can see a reliable and predictable falling in the cost of a fundamental service that you are providing, which is what was going on, that you you get more powerful computers for the same price. Your network bandwidth was increasing. The cost of storage was decreasing. Like, you're getting all of the first principles commodities that these services were built on were reliably falling in price. Then you can say, like, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. We just know that people are going to use a lot more of this stuff when the cost is half or, 10 times less what it is today. And that's exactly what happened. And so that's what I'm predicting as well, is that these, the demand for labor by robots, whether those robots are cars or whether they are Optimus robots or whether they're anything in between, is going to be 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times the demand for labor that we have today, because the price of labor is going to crash and we're going to be able to do all kinds of things that people have always wanted to do but never could afford to do before. Yeah, so I think that's my sidestep answer. I do think that Tesla's in a great position to succeed massively in all of these realms. And I think they can do that at the same time that other people succeed as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I've quickly managed to find some revenue data here on AWS. So Q1 2014, they were only operating at $1 billion per quarter. And if we look now to what Amazon has achieved very recently as Q3 2024, and they're way over $25 billion a quarter. No one could even have imagined that 10, 15 years ago, and definitely weren't expecting Amazon to pull that off either.
Exactly. And that's where I say, just because you don't know exactly what the business model is going to end up being that leverages the falling price of these technologies doesn't mean that you can't say, hey, there's going to be something that takes advantage of the fact that all these things are significantly cheaper. And I think that Amazon had started investing in AWS somewhere in the mid-aughts. I think it was 2005 or 6, somewhere in there roughly was when that project was incepted. And so it took like 8 to 10 years, I think, for it to really start to even get to that, point at the beginning of your chart where it was $1 billion a quarter, which is a pretty massive business already. And so that, there was a lot of naysaying that happened even while Amazon was in the process of building out this business.
Yeah, Amazon, I believe, initially had built it for internal use. It wasn't actually, maybe they had a vision to be sold eventually, but, they wanted to use it. They wanted to make the most for themselves to improve their own operations.
That was the thing, is that they were building one of the biggest websites on earth. And so if they can solve all of the bottlenecks to building one of the biggest websites on earth, and then they make all of the things that they use to solve that problem available to the broader market as a platform, well, then you just enable the internet essentially. And that's exactly what they did.